Well, good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading Flying Against Time, Chapter 11. If you remember, as we ended last week's chapter, somebody was yelling, "Help! Murder! Help!" That cry of terror thrilled Ted Scott through and through. At first the thought occurred to him that it might be due to a family brawl, some drunken fellow perhaps beating his wife. But the scream seemed to have more in it than that. It sounded to Ted like that of one of mortal agony, and there was no doubt that it came from the throat of a woman. A considerable distance back from the road he could see the outlines of what appeared to be an old, dilapidated farmhouse. There was a feeble light in one of the lower windows, but the rest of the house was shadowed in darkness. Ted drove his car into the shadows of the trees that bordered the road and jumped out. He had no weapons with him of any kind. He threw open his toolbox, grabbed the heaviest wrench he could find, and hurried through the bars of the fence up the pathway that led to the house. The screams still continued, at times muffled as though a hand was held over the mouth, rising more shrilly at other times as though the hand had been pushed aside. Ted reached the door and hammered on it with his wrench. There was no response. He could hear what sounded like a scuffle in the inner room, as though a determined effort was being made to stifle the screams. Ted felt the knob of the door. It yielded to his touch. He pushed open the door and entered. The next moment something heavy descended on his head. 1,000 stars seemed to dance before his eyes, and he fell stricken to the floor. How much time elapsed before Ted Scott opened his eyes he never knew. His head ached. His arms and feet were tightly bound. He had been tightly trussed up so that he could scarcely move a muscle. The light in the room was brighter now, so bright that it hurt his eyes, and he closed them again. He tried to bring to mind his actions just before he had received the blow that had laid him out. It was hard work, for his brain was reeling, and consecutive thought was almost impossible. Gradually it came back to him. He remembered the screams he had heard, his hasty leap from the car, the speeding to the house, the trying of the door, his entrance into the room. There, of necessity, he stopped. He could hear the rough voices of 3 or 4 men engaged in low but animated conversation. Caution was coming to Ted now, and he did not open his eyes wide again. He barely lifted the eyelids and saw things in a haze. There were 4 men seated at a table. All of them seemed to be of a depraved type. They had caps drawn low over their foreheads and handkerchiefs tied about the lower parts of their faces. Perhaps this accounted for the muffled sounds of their voice. The disguise, rude though it was effectual, and Ted had not the least idea how they really looked. He strained his ears to catch what they were saying. "Hustle the girl away, Jack," said one in an authoritative tone that marked him as the leader of the gang. "She's done her part of the job." "And done it well," said another voice approvingly. "Gosh, those screams sounded like the real thing. They brought that boob running. I almost busted laughing." "She's a good actress, all right," agreed the one who had first spoken. "She ought to be in vaudeville. But now, get her away quick. Give her the 200 we promised her and put her on a train. And just tell her, by the way, that if she ever squeals about this night's work, it'll be the last peep she ever lets out. She can't get away so far as that we won't be able to find her." "Right-o," said the man addressed as Jack, as he rose and left the room. Ted could hear an unintelligible conversation in the next room, interspersed with feminine giggles. Then the back door slammed, and there was a sound of retreating footsteps. A moment later, Ted heard the purring of an automobile as it darted away. "That guy is taking a long time in coming to," remarked one of the thugs as he cast a glance towards Ted, who remained perfectly motionless. "It was a tough crack I handed him," said another, "but I had to make sure. You seen that wrench he had in his hand? He could have put up a hard scrap with that, if he'd gotten a chance to use it. And from the look of him, he's a pretty husky guy. No use taking chances, if you don't have to." "A good night's work," put in another. 1,000 for each of us. And jobs ain't been so plentiful lately, so that 1,000 iron men looks good to me." "Easy money, I'd call it," remarked the leader. "But remember, it ain't finished yet." The others stirred uneasily. "There's going to be a mighty big holler when it's found out he's missing," said one of them. And it's a long ride to the place we're going to hide out with him, added another. They'll be ringing up all the towns we've got to pass through, and the cops will be on the lookout for us. Stow your gab, you dogs, commanded the leader savagely. You knew what you was getting into when you got into this, didn't you? Trying to crawfish, are you? Why are you getting so weak-kneed all of a sudden? This job has got to be done and done right, see? If you back out, you don't get 1 cent of the 1,000 that's promised you. And not only that, he added, but you know what happens to them that tries to run out on Dago Dan. The threat was evidently sufficient, and all signs of insubordination disappeared. "Ah, don't get sore," said one of the men placatingly. "Of course we'll do what you say." "Sure," agreed another. "You better," snarled the chief. "If you want your 1,000, you've got to work for it." Ted Scott had been drinking in every word of this conversation that meant so much to him. He had thought at first that this was another plot of the Gales to do him injury, but he knew from the build of the men that Gregg and Duck did not form part of this group. This danger was from another quarter, from the outside world or the underworld, maneuvered and inspired by this unknown rascal known to his tools as Dago Dan, probably the head of some gang of professional gamblers. So Bill Thwombley had not been wrong when he had warned his friend that men with large amounts at stake would try to injure him in their endeavors to win. Well, they were on their way to success, all right. At any rate, they had won the first round. With caution, but gradually exerting all his strength, the young aviator strained against his bonds. But the scoundrels had done their job well. The shackles were rough rope, but they might as well have been of steel for all the impression Ted could make on them. For the time, even if he were able to succeed, it would be of no use at this moment. He reviewed the circumstances that had led up to his present desperate plight. He denounced himself bitterly for having come upon this trip alone. It was a cunning scheme, contrived with infinite pains, and yet with many chances of failure. But those chances had not materialized. Everything had worked to a charm from the viewpoint of his captors. They had well earned the money promised them by Dago Dan. But had they yet earned it? Not fully, judging by the words of the chief of the gang. Something still remained to be done before the job was complete. No doubt they had a secure hiding place somewhere, and where he would be closely guarded. It was probably far away, judging from the remark that there would be many towns they would have to pass through before they reached their destination. He did not give up hope. Any one of a dozen things might happen. He had been in tight places before and squeezed through, but he had to admit that few had been tighter than this. He checked the current of his thoughts just then, for the conversation was renewed. "How long have we got to stay around this old shebang?" one of the thugs asked of his leader. "The sooner we can make our getaway, the better." "We got to hang around a while yet," was the surly reply. "We can't do nothing till Jack gets back with the car. Then, too, the later it is, the fewer the cars we'll have to meet on the road. You and Bill go outside and stand guard," he went on. "There's no use of our chewing a rag here. You stay in front of the house, and Bill can watch the back, and it won't be healthy for either of you if you don't keep your eyes open." The men obeyed, and the leader of the thugs was left alone. He got up after a while and began pacing the floor. He came near Ted Scott and stood regarding him with a baleful smile on his face. "Easy money," he muttered to himself. Ted opened his eyes and looked at the man steadily. There was no use in shamming unconsciousness any longer. The bandit stepped back a pace, taken by surprise. "So you're awake, eh?" he growled as he recovered his self-possession. "Pretty stiff crack you got on the conch. Thought it would hold you a little longer." "What are you going to do with me, anyway?" asked Ted. "Well," replied the man, seating himself in a chair and taking out a cigarette, "most folks would think we'd done enough already. But I don't mind telling you that you're not going to stay here long. We got a nice place all fixed up for you, and we'll be taking you there soon. We're going to have a long ride in an automobile, and we won't charge you a cent." "What's the big idea?" asked Ted. "Have you got any grudge against me?" The man put out a deprecating hand. Not a thing, buddy," he said soothingly. "You click all right with me. It's all in the way of business. I got a job to do, and you happen to be my job." He lighted a cigarette and lolled back comfortably in his chair. "I happen to be working for a pretty particular boss," he went on. "He don't pay in no counterfeit money, and he don't want no counterfeit job. It isn't healthy to make him peevish, so I'm going to do just as the boss expects." This was said with an air of finality. "Of course you know who I am," said Ted. "Oh, sure thing," said the other. "You're that guy that's going to fly from coast to coast, Ted Scott. Only you ain't going to fly there, take it from me." "The name may not mean anything to you," said Ted, "but it means a lot to some people. Do you think you can get away with this? The government itself will take the thing in hand. You'll be hunted down like rats. There isn't a place in the whole world where you can hide so that they won't get you. They'll never let up until they have you nabbed." "Applesauce," responded the man. "We've got everything fixed good and proper. 'Tain't as if we're killing you. Just a little vacation, that's all." "Of course you're doing this for money," remarked Ted. "What else?" "How much?" "None of your business," snapped the man. "They ain't money enough in all the world to make me call this thing off. And why? Because nobody backs out when he's promised to do a job for Dago Dan. I'm pretty tough, but I ain't nothing alongside that bird. What he says goes, so you might as well save your breath." The boss got up and stalked to the door. "I'm going out to help the boys stand watch," he vouchsafed. "But mind, I won't be more than a few feet away, and at the least sound from you, I'll come in and make you wish you hadn't. Perhaps I'd better take a look at them cords and see that they're all right." He took a candle from the table, bent down and examined Ted's bonds with great care. To test them with both hands, he put the candle on a chair. "They'll be all right," he muttered with satisfaction as he straightened up. "I've got to hand it to Jack. He certainly knows how to make a good job of it." "Mind now, no monkey business," he warned. "One peep from you and I'll have you gagged, and my boys are pretty rough when it comes to shutting a guy's mouth. If you think we're easy, just try starting something." He opened the door with a chuckle and passed outside. Start something? What a mockery! How could Ted start something, trussed up as he was? There seemed no evasion of that ride that he had been promised. A ride to captivity, to the ruin of his hopes, to the thwarting of all the plans he'd made for the memorable contest that meant so much to him. And not only to him, but to the loyal friends whose interests were bound up with his, to Walter Hapworth, to Paul Monet, to the host of friends who had wagered their money on him, and the agony of Eben and Charity at his disappearance. Again he felt the ropes that bound him. He strained against them with all his might, a strength doubled by his terrible plight. They refused to yield an inch. He looked wildly about him for something that might help. Nothing was revealed by the feeble flame of the candle. The candle! A thought came to him, so fantastic, so wild, that he almost rejected it as soon as conceived. And yet... One chance in 1,000, but beggars can't be choosers. He must take that chance. He listened. He could hear faintly the voices of the men conversing outside. He began to wriggle his body slowly towards the candle, left by the bandit where he had placed it on the chair. Wonder what's going to happen next. Well, tune in next Tuesday to find out as we read Chapter 12, A Dash to Freedom. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.